by successive president. Is that a breach of the Constitution, or is because we don't have enough adequate resources? I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minority Leader Honorable Haruna Iddrisu, for honoring your promise to me and also presenting to us an equally invigorating discussion of the Constitution and identifying some gaps in it that require review. Thank you very much. I think at this point we would be inviting questions from among the guests to our questions and comments to our presenters, and I think we would take one question at a time, but if there is any common or follow-up question, we could take two or more.
I think that we should be careful not to make the Constitution the straw man on which we blame all our failings. The Constitution has issues, but are we able to think? The Constitution doesn't limit doesn't have an upper ceiling for Supreme Court judges. So what do we do? Can't we agree on consensus and have one? They stated over the years there seems to have been a consensus, and then a government seems to be going about the consensus. Parliament can have a conversation with the president and say, "Oh, John, chill, you're going a bit out of the way." And remember that we must approve, and Parliament is not bound to give a reason to approve or disapprove. And so, if you are going beyond this number, we Parliament, whether we are constituted by your party or not, will not grant approval. Do you understand? Do we need people to line up in the sun to vote for Parliament to assert itself? I think, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of people to blame for the state we are in, but I lay the blame solely or largely on Parliament. The Constitution says you should pass a property rights bill. It's been 30 years. Parliament, where is it? In the process, you have ceded your legislative power to the Supreme Court, which is happily legislating. Through the accident of cases that come before it, the Supreme Court will legislate and then do amendments. And you're sitting down, you haven't done anything. 30 years. It's an aspect of our Constitution that the premise of the Constitution donated to Parliament. You have failed, and you want an amendment. Another article says you should determine what international business and economic transactions are, and the circumstances under which approval is required or not required. You haven't done it. In the process, the Supreme Court is legislating. International arbitral tribunals are legislating on our law. Yes, guilty as charged. I got them to do a couple of them. And yes, and Parliament hasn't bothered to look at it. Now, if you want to amend something, you must tell us that you have tried everything and it hasn't worked. So let's change it. But when you haven't tried it, how can you tell us that we should amend it? I have more, but you said just one. Article 71. Where does it say? Now watch this. Article 71, in my understanding, anticipates that at the beginning of governance, the committee will be set up to determine the terms and conditions going forward. Has this ever happened?
That's not the case.
It is at the end. And so they look at the circumstances and give themselves a fat back pay and a pension. And so we have twisted it conveniently. Do we need an amendment of the Constitution? I think that of those of us who have the voice or who lead, we are not bound by the law. We want to find smart ways of beating the law. Then you blame the law. Article 71 doesn't say a lot of what we say it should do. Independent constitutional bodies. I know, I'm in a long-standing fight with the Auditor General. I know that Parliament doesn't support some of the things that we have done in trying to hold the Auditor General to account. But I'm sorry, Honourable Majority Leader, the Constitution doesn't really make the Auditor General your agent. It doesn't say that. Asking it to submit a report to you does not make you a supervisor. And so the people of Ghana whose monies are audited are entitled to know. That is why there's a specific clause granting it independence from you and everybody else, that office, and saying in the same sub-article that granted the independence that it shall issue disallowances and surcharges. What has happened now is that the current Auditor General is frozen. He's waiting for Parliament before he does it. His last letter to me is that he's writing a report for Parliament. Until then, he won't justify why he says he has recovered 2.2 billion, which in our view doesn't exist anywhere. Now, if Parliament had been treating the reports well, and the Public Accounts Committee wasn't divided by partisanship, we see you on TV, nothing happens. You think we'll be fighting? If you took it on yourself and made sure that the monies are refunded, you think anybody will be fighting? Parliament sat down and passed that even the finance minister should have surcharge powers. That I believe section 72 of the Public Financial Management Act. That has never been exercised. And so when all of these things do not, I know you want to stop me, but please then ask me, okay, not to call me the next time. Asset declaration, and that's another thing, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. When the Constitution says something, Parliament finds interesting ways of defeating it. The Constitution says that assets shall be declared before the person is appointed. Parliament sat down and redefined the word before to mean 3 months after appointment. I like, where on earth is this possible? When the Constitution says before, but before can be interpreted to mean 3 months after. As a result, people don't declare and nobody chases it. But I thought before would mean that before they appear before you, they have declared, and their asset declaration will be before Parliament when they are vetting. And so Parliament can ask you questions on your assets. But Parliament sits down and passes a law deferring it, and that law still hasn't been amended. It is waiting Cabinet approval. The last time Cabinet says they set up a subcommittee. Now they say there are more important things. So that bill is still sitting before the Cabinet with no approval. Last one, I'll sit down. Last one. Lands. We spoke about land, public lands. When the Constitution gave the Lands Commission independence, it then gave the minister power to issue general policy, written policy of a general nature, which means that the only control that the minister should have over Lands Commission is general policy approved by the president. Not one policy document has been issued. Yet state lands have been returned. Who issued the policy? When the Constitution says that, it's been returned, and nobody's asking any questions. Last one. Last one. Please, next time don't go. I'm glad Honorable Majority Leader mentioned a 7-year cycle for creating constituencies. The Electoral Commission will tell you that we started harassing them on that issue. What we have is constitutional illegality and clear executive gerrymandering. Because when the 7-year cycle is up, and the EC alone should have the power to determine constituencies. We have passed a local government and now a local governance act, cleverly saying that an MP cannot belong to 2 district assemblies. And so between the executive and the legislature, as long as they divide districts, when the 7-year cycle is up, EC somehow considers itself bound by the statute, and so will create constituencies to reflect the wishes of the executive. That is gerrymandering. And we are doing that and then blaming the Constitution as a strong man. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm one of those who believe that the Constitution hasn't failed us. We have failed the Constitution. Maybe instead of us amending the Constitution should amend us.
Looking around the room, I'm the only person now who was a member of the Consultative Assembly 30 years ago. That's how old I am. But I was a very young man then, and so I agree entirely with all these points that have been raised. They have been raised over the years, and Madam confessed that most of these points were raised before the committee, Professor Fiajo committee. I agree with the minority leader that what we should be talking about now is an implementation committee. It's an implementation committee where we look at some of this, and like it's taught me in law school. It's his mind. I'm older than you. No. I didn't go to law school as a young man. In fact, I went to law school when I was almost leaving Parliament after 12 years. So I was a very senior person. But I can assure you that 5th October this year, my class was 15 years. So I'm a Supreme Court material. Supreme Court. From 5th of October, we are 15 years. And Haruna is 20 years. He's an incoming Chief Justice. Anyway, so what about happened was that at the Consultative Assembly, we did our best. 258 people were there. And today they came to announce to me, I asked somewhere that Nana Kwame Nkrumah had died from a sin. And you know, all the powerful chiefs, Nana Boapon, all the powerful chiefs in Ghana then, because each region was to bring a chief, there were 10 of them. And then, in fact, I worked in a committee which Osafo Mafo chaired, because that was the committee that created Commission for Civic Education, Electoral Commission, all the committees. Nana now, who is the Council of State Chairman, was our Business Committee Chairman. 258 people out of 260 were in there. But we had a problem. So the technology of the times were not available to us. This whole idea of proportional representation came up because some of us at the time thought that that was the only way we could bring everybody on board. Do you know the argument that defeated it? They say after the election, how could the calculations be made? Can you say that at this time, where even on your phone, within 3 minutes, you can calculate how many people would be provided by a party. So we agreed that there should be amendments. And as somebody said, I think we have talked enough about the amendments. The Fiajo Committee is comprehensive enough. Let this group start thinking about implementation, because I think there have been some people say don't touch the Constitution at all, but even those of us who made it 30 years ago knew that there should be amendments. So procedures were made for those amendments to be. It's true that it's a little rigid, particularly the entrenched clauses, but we can put a few of them together and do the referendum once, or even do a referendum to amend the amended version. So I would think that we should put up an implementation committee to implement whatever is there. Enough has been said about it. And like Ace said, some of the issues we talk about, it's not about the Constitution, it's about ourselves. It's about ourselves. Why should we have 18? In fact, the judge that appeared before the committee the other time even says that we need about 25 Supreme Court judges. And we can make it 30 so it's about ourselves. We should stop doing some of the things we are doing. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
I came here because of the gender factor, and I knew that the two most powerful people in Parliament will be here today to be able to listen to us. You said if the Constitution is not amended, what it means is that we will continue to have gender disparities among us. I don't think so, because when you look at the Constitution, Article 17.4 says that when we have differences in political, social, economic situation in the country, Parliament should enact laws to solve those differences. So for Parliament to say that they cannot solve those differences because Article 17.3 is saying that no one should be discriminated upon, I think that, as my brother have said, the Constitution has provided the way, and if we want to do the right thing, we can do the right thing. In fact, the directive principles of state policy, Article 35, 6b, says that whenever we are going to do appointments, recruitments, the appointing person, especially into public positions, should try to make sure that they put on gender lenses when that is being done. In the country, when you look at Labour Commission said the public sector, they have employed 87% of men and 13% of women. This is against the Constitution of Ghana. So we don't need to come up with new laws thinking about reforms when the ones that we already have in the Constitution, we are not obeying them. In fact, conventions, treaties. When you look at the treaties that we have, like the Beijing Declaration, we talk about CEDAW, that's Convention on the Discrimination of All Forms of what against women. Then we talk about the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. All these things were accepted by Ghana, signed, and they are legal binding. But still, we are not doing anything to help the gender factor. So I think that Parliament should do something about the affirmative action that they have brought to its doorsteps. Passing it it needs both the two political parties that have representation in parliament. And I've never heard any of them speaking in support of the affirmative action bill. Yet, I think the majority leader is the vice chairman of, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. And South Africa just brought a bill about gender something, and you have accepted it. If it is accepted there, let us also do something so that here affirmative action bill will be passed. If not that, in your regime you pass it somewhere, but in your own country there's no any affirmative action bill. I don't think it's right. Thank you.